Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Linda Hummelshea Art Space Gallery, the online version of our gallery. And the current show is the work of Robb Sandagata. And I'm introducing you to Robb. Robb, would you care to say a little bit about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Robb Sandagata. I am a artist currently based in Lowell, Massachusetts. I've got a studio here with my wife, who's also an artist. My background is, well, I officially studied sculpture in college, which quickly translated into performance art and installation and other pieces. I've also been obsessed with music for a very long time. And I try and combine some of the aesthetics of the punk music that I grew up on and comic books and heavy metal and all kinds of different pop culture references into the work that I make, which is largely grotesque at this point. Um, I've also worked in art education for a long time now, and some of that bleeds into my work as well. There's a lot of critique and criticism that's embedded in the work. It's not always super obvious, but there's a lot
So
of stuff
what
in there.
kind of, when you say critique criticism, can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean?
Sure. Well, it's also something I've been doing really for all of my life. Probably the earliest versions when I was a teenager would constantly deconstruct and criticize all the advertisements on TV or maybe whatever, sitcom my family was watching and have arguments with my dad about that. I also used to deface a lot of the catalogs that would appear in the kitchen, and like I would black out the eyes and have like black stuff running out of the models, and also some like ooze coming out of their mouths. And it's interesting because that the blacked out eyes has become a very common thread in my work now.
So I'm thinking specifically about the work, about two of the works of your works that are in the show. There's that one, I forgot the name of it now, the square one.
That one's called Alone Together.
Right, Alone Together. And then the large triptych, um, which is pain management.
Yes.
So I guess it's inherent in some ways in work that you're doing and many of us are doing at this point, that there are some overt and covert responses to what we're all experiencing right now, the pandemic.
Mhm.
So how does that reality appear? I see it appearing in both of those works, but how does it appear for you?
Yeah. Well, another thing I should say, I'm really interested in the idea of subversive things, which, of course, so a lot of the punk music I grew up listening to, or even I read a lot of comic books in the '80s, and even if you're reading the most straight ahead superhero comics like 1980s Captain America, there was always a subtext of political commentary that appears in those comics. So,
Right. I,
there's a lot of Ronald Reagan bashing that's
yeah.
sometimes not so subtle. Um,
I think it's important that you mention that because many of us, I won't include myself in that, but many of us aren't necessarily not aware of those levels that things are presented to us at. And as an artist, that's something that I feel many of us do. How about if you speak specifically about um, one of those pieces and how you see
sure. So
that?
I'll start with pain management. Pain management is probably the most complex painting I've done so far. So it's a 3-panel triptych. It's actually inspired by my favorite painting that hangs at Worcester Art Museum, which is Piero di Cosimo, and it's The Discovery of Honey by Bacchus. So I've adapted kind of the landscape that appears in that painting, which is not 3 panels, it's one long kind of altarpiece painting with a central tree figure. And so this is, I guess, kind of my updated version. There's a lot of hot pink and there's a lot of oozing pink everywhere. So not only is it oozing out of the tree, but it's also oozing out of the eye sockets and faces and mouths of a lot of the characters that appear in the painting.
Which relates directly to one of your interests, as you said earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. So one thing is that, the original painting is about the discovery of honey, which of course was used to create meat. So all of the fawns and other characters in the original painting are all drunk on meat and doing weird things, falling over on the grass. And so um, I basically replaced all of the characters with my sort of figures. But it's called pain management because I see the pink substance in the painting as either like a narcotic, maybe it's a direct response to the opioid epidemic that's gripped this country for the last, I don't know, 10 years or however long it's been. So it's specific to that. So I want that to be kind of gross and overwhelming. But also I'm interested in the idea that pain management is something that every human being has to engage with on some level, whether it's managing a chronic pain that might be debilitating or just, mental pain from everyday life, or, even expanding into now the pain of dealing with this pandemic and being isolated and having everything change so quickly. So it's kind of an extreme version of how people deal with problems or don't deal with those problems.
Yes. So one other point, because we're getting close to our limit here. So your work is not directly approachable in the sense that so I first became aware of your work when I first started to go to the studios where you live, and I had many friends there, and your work was always hanging up in the halls, and I was very fascinated by it. And at first, initially not put off in the sense that I said, "Oh, this is disgusting. I don't want to look at this," but put off because of the depth of the way the emotional content of it strikes you when you look at it. How important is that to you as an artist?
The emotional content is it's very important. I think in a lot of ways it's the most important thing. It's but it's also interesting because I don't want to tell people what that emotion should be. I hope that the emotion I'm trying to depict comes through clearly. Sometimes it doesn't though, or sometimes a lot of people see more humor in my work than I necessarily think is there. I mean, there's
Well,
definitely humor, but
yeah,
I sometimes feel like I'm using the techniques of cartooning that are meant to be funny in ways that are not funny. But like, there's a lot of exaggeration uh, and misshapen bodies and body parts and that sort of thing, which I mean, sometimes they are funny, and sometimes I think they're not funny at all. So it
well,
just depends on the
yeah.
piece.
I mean, of course, uh, I would also throw caricature in there, even though that isn't necessarily what you're doing. I think that you understand the fact that what we put into our works, what you put into your work, you can't necessarily expect the viewer to get. The
Hmm.
fact that I have always felt an emotional connection to your work tells me that it's there, even though the emotion I might be feeling when I look at it may have nothing to do with what you intended. And I think that speaks directly to what you were saying earlier about the subversive aspect of your work, or for that
Hmm.
matter, subversive aspect of art in general. The
Yeah,
fact that you're getting me as the viewer involved in something that you may not have necessarily intended, but it pulls me in.
yeah. I mean, the reaction is the part that's important. I would rather have a negative reaction. I'd rather have an extremely negative reaction than indifference.
Not at all. I agree completely.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I realize that we haven't had a whole lot of time to go into depth in this,